da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da.
Guys, it's LaFinchy here, all things history, and in this video, I decided to start a new series in which I would redraw the borders of the world. Well, as I would see them. This series will start in Anglo-America, which consists of the modern-day countries of Canada and United States of America. Just remember that this is just my personal opinion, so don't take this too hard. But you can also tell me what you think in the comments below. So without further ado, let's go into the borders. So first, we're going to start off in northern and western Canada. So first off, in the north, I decide to make one large Inuit nation called Nunavut that contains northern Alaska, the northern Yukon Territory, most of the Northwest Territories, all of Nunavut, and also the northern parts of Quebec and Newfoundland, which is also part of the Nunavut homeland. I've decided to give them independence because I don't like the fact that there's not a single Native American country in the entire world. So I decided I'm going to add a few. Then we'll go to Western Canada. Then we'll go to further south, in which Cascadia is here. Cascadia contains all of Oregon and Washington, a little bit of Idaho, cause why not? Most of British Columbia, the Alaskan Panhandle, and also a bit of Yukon. I've also made the rest of Alaska a puppet state of Cascadia, because I think it would be logical. Also, so that Cascadia would control all of the northern Pacific coast. Then here, I made an enlarged Yukon, an enlarged Alberta, which contains some of British Columbia, Yukon, and Northwest Territories. I've also made the rest of Yukon into a small state. So, Alberta, maybe Alberta can exterminate all the rats here too. Then finally, there is Saskatchewan and Manitoba, which I made independent states, but I cut off some size from them a bit, especially Manitoba. And also, I took away a bit of land from Alberta and Saskatchewan for a country that I'll be elaborating on later. Moving on to Eastern Canada, we'll still keep Canada alive, but it will be a smaller Canada, featuring Ontario, a little bit of Quebec, northern Manitoba, less of northern Saskatchewan, and tiny bits of Alberta and the Northwest Territories. Then Quebec will be its own country, since it's a uniquely French province of Canada, and it will contain just some of Quebec. The rest of Quebec would belong to Nunavut, as I said earlier. Then, both Newfoundland and Labrador would become independent countries. Then, I would release New Brunswick, and also absorb Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island into it, because why not? New Brunswick can take it all. So, going into the US, I'd make a country featuring Western New Brunswick and Northern Maine, and I would call it Aroostook, after Aroostook County. Then we'll go into Massachusetts, which is way bigger, containing Monday, Massachusetts, eastern New Hampshire, and also most of Maine, as they previously controlled Maine. The rest of New Hampshire would go to Vermont, which Vermont is actually one of the only 4 states of America to actually be an independent country during its history. And then over here, I decide to give Indian Stream independence, since, hey, why not have an end or like stay in the Americas? Then we'll go over south to Connecticut and Rhode Island, which are probably allied to each other, just to stop Massachusetts from conquering them. And then, finally in New England, I decide to give the tiny island of Nantucket independence, since Nantucket is pretty cool. Going to the other side of America, we'll go into the western states. So I decided to make California into 2 states. There's California as it is, with some of Baja California, and there's also the state of Jefferson in Northern California, which is basically a more conservative area of it. Then we go into one of the biggest states of the continental US, the Mormon state of Deseret. This would contain Utah, Colorado, a little bit of New Mexico, Wyoming, Idaho, Nevada, and some of California. I've also decided to make Las Vegas into a city-state, since if it was in Deseret, the city would probably die. Then I decide to give Arizona and New Mexico to the Native Americans. So I added the Navajo, the Hopi, the Zuni, the Pueblos, the Hualapai, the Yavapai. There's also the Mojave, West. Then there's the Pima and O'odham, the Maricopa, and also the Yuma. The biggest of these states would be the Apache state, which would contain the Western Apache, the Chiricahua, and also the Mescalero Apaches. Going further westward, we go to Middle America. Here, I decide to add Texas as a country. I decide to make it a little bit smaller, compromising parts of eastern, northern, and western parts of Texas to other countries. However, it still would be fairly powerful. Then
Then up north, we have the state of Comanche, which would contain the Texas Panhandle, Greer County in Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Panhandle, and also northeastern New Mexico, which is the homeland of the Apaches also. Going into Oklahoma, I decided to make 6 new Native American nations. I decided to make the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Seminole, the Cree, and also the Cherokee into independent nations. I've also given the Cherokee another part of Oklahoma, where there's also a lot of Cherokee people. And then finally in Oklahoma, I decided to give the Osage tribe independence. The rest of Oklahoma would be split by Louisiana, which is a more powerful version of itself, containing most of Louisiana, a chunk of Arkansas, a little bit of Texas, and also the lion's share of Oklahoma. Although I did give away western Florida. Then there's a little bit of Oklahoma that belongs to Kansas, which I decided to elongate all the way into Colorado. Then, up north, we have the Lakota Sioux Nation, which I made even bigger, containing most South and North Dakota, all of Nebraska, a chunk of Colorado, most of Wyoming, also most of Montana, and also a little strip of Alberta and Saskatchewan. Then, east to the Lakota Sea is the state of Iowa, which I decided to make even bigger because Iowa deserves it. So, Iowa also has everything that is behind the Mississippi River, just not below Missouri. So, more people can get to experience the dread of living in Iowa. So, now we're going to go into Eastern America. We'll start off between Iowa and Louisiana. I decided to enlarge the state of Missouri to contain what remains of Arkansas and also what remains of the west side of the Mississippi. Then, on the very south, I decided to make Florida an independent nation, because I don't think anyone would want to deal with their shenanigans. I also decided to upgrade them a little bit, giving them a bit of Georgia, and also all of western Florida, except this piece here to give the Dixie Confederacy a little bit of Gulf Coast. Speaking of that, I decided to give the Deep South a state that they're in, containing Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, both Carolinas, and Tennessee. And this is not the Confederate States of America, this is different. Then we'll go up north, to Kentucky, which is literally Kentucky, nothing else. And then we go to Virginia, which is reunited with Western Virginia, and also a larger Virginian Chesapeake. Then we go to the Great Lakes region, where we have this state containing North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the Upper region of Michigan to form Assiniboia. Then, and a little bit of Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio formed the Great Lakes Confederacy. Now I decided to add some city-states in this area. By that I mean way too much. So we obviously have the major city-states, which are Chicago, Milwaukee, Grand Rapids, Detroit. Well, maybe not Detroit since it's falling apart. But there are also some minor city-states that are around those. Those like Kenosha, Oshkosh, Monroe, Ann Arbor, Akron, Sandusky, Port Austin, and then I also added 3 city-states to the Upper region, which would make it more scattered, like Marquette, St. Ignace, and also Marinette. I'd say it looked pretty good. Finally, we go into the northern side of the East Coast. Here is where the final set of Anglo-American nations are. So starting from the south, we have an enlarged version of Delaware. Despite losing southern Delaware to Virginia, made up for it by having the entire southern side of New Jersey. Then beside it is Maryland, which, besides Virginia claiming its southern Chesapeake lands, also has its original land. Then here's Pennsylvania, which is ruled by the Amish. So Pennsylvania controls all of modern-day Pennsylvania and also northern New Jersey. However, there would be a steep divide between the west, which would be more Amish, and the east, which would be not so Amish. Then, in Newark, New York City, Long Island, and a bit of upstate New York, is the greatest city-state of New York City, which would be an economic powerhouse of the area. Then in the north, I decided to bring back the Iroquois Confederacy, even though the area has very little presence of its natives. I think it would still be cool if it existed. And then finally, in what remains of New York, is upstate New York. Fun fact, the Louisiana Purchase of 1803 cost the United States of America a total of $15 million. In comparison, if that purchase were to happen today, then the entire parcel of land would cost roughly $350 million. America sure did get quite the bargain there.